Hey, for exposing the lie my parents believed before kicking me out at 16? I'm Jasmine, 27 now, and in my family I was always the daughter who made things difficult, which usually meant I was the one asking why Chloe was believed before I could even finish a sentence. I still fold my hoodies the same way Aunt Ruth taught me after she took me in, with the sleeves tucked flat so they fit in one drawer. It sounds stupid, but when you've had your life shoved into a trash bag at 16, small, organized things start feeling like proof you survived. Chloe is 3 years older than me. In our house, she wasn't just the oldest. She was the one everyone protected from discomfort. If Chloe cried, she was overwhelmed. If I cried, I was dramatic. If Chloe forgot a chore, she had too much going on. If I forgot one, I was selfish. If Chloe broke something, someone had upset her. If something went missing, my backpack was searched first. My mother, Audrey, had a way of turning every room into a courtroom where she was both judge and victim. She could be warm in public, all soft hands and proud smiles, then punish you with silence on the car ride home because you made her look like a bad mother. My father, Robert, was quieter. People mistook that for kindness. I did too for a long time. But quiet can be its own kind of cruelty when the person being hurt is begging you to speak. The first time I remember understanding my place, I was 12. Chloe knocked a framed photo off the hallway table while she was rushing to get ready for a school event. The glass cracked across my grandma Elaine's face in the picture. Chloe started crying before Mom even got to the hall. What happened? Mom asked. Chloe pointed toward me and said, she was bothering me. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, still holding a pencil. I said, I didn't touch her. Mom didn't even look at me. Jasmine, why can't you let your sister have one peaceful night? That was how things worked. Chloe made a mess and I became the reason for it. Dad stood in doorways rubbing the back of his neck, saying things like, let's not turn this into a bigger problem. A year later, Chloe lost $40 she was supposed to use for a school fundraiser. Mom came into my room and started opening my drawers. I said, are you searching my room? Mom said, don't be defensive if you have nothing to hide. Dad stood behind her, looking at my posters instead of my face. The money turned up 2 days later in Chloe's gym bag. Nobody apologized. Mom just said, well, Jasmine, you can understand why I had to check. I got good at explaining myself calmly. I thought if I was clear enough, steady enough, impossible to dismiss, my parents would eventually see that I wasn't the problem. That was the lie I told myself to survive living there. Grandma Elaine was the only one on that side of the family who sometimes pushed back. She wasn't dramatic about it. She would just say things that made everyone stiffen. Once, after Chloe complained that I got praise for a test score, Grandma Elaine said, a compliment for Jasmine is not an injury to Chloe. Mom's smile froze. Dad stared down at his plate. Chloe didn't talk to Grandma for the rest of dinner. Grandma died when I was 15. After that, the house felt like someone had taken the last bit of fresh air out of it. There was an old cedar box she had kept, the kind with a brass latch and a faint sweet smell when you opened it. It held family papers, a few photos, some envelopes, and a small gold locket that had belonged to her mother. I wasn't supposed to touch it, but Grandma had shown it to me once and told me, some things are valuable because of who remembered them. The night my life split open was during a winter ice storm, the kind where the radio warned people to stay off the roads. I was 16. I'd stayed late at school to talk to a counselor. I didn't tell my parents because I knew Mom would say I was trying to make the family look bad. The counselor's office had a little clock above the door. I remember staring at it while she asked, do you feel safe at home? I didn't know how to answer that honestly without setting my whole life on fire. So I said, usually. I got home around dinner. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Waiting quiet. Mom was in the dining room with Chloe pressed against her side. Dad stood near the kitchen entrance. On the table was Grandma Elaine's cedar box broken open. The brass latch hung crooked. The locket was there too, its chain snapped and the front dented. A torn envelope sat beside it. Mom didn't ask where I'd been. She said, how could you? I looked at the box, then at Chloe's red eyes. What happened? Chloe's voice shook in that perfect way she had. Don't do that. Don't act like you don't know. Dad said my name quietly, not like he was worried, but like he wanted me to cooperate with whatever had already been decided. Mom said money was missing, money tied to Grandma Elaine's records. She said the locket was damaged. She said Chloe had confronted me, and I had shoved her, screamed that Grandma loved me more, and destroyed the box. I stared at Chloe. I wasn't even here. Chloe flinched as if my words had hit her. You always do this. You make everyone think I'm crazy. I was at school, I said. Call the counselor. Please. She can tell you what time I left. Mom's face hardened. You're going to drag school staff into this? Yes, I said, because for once there was an easy way to prove I wasn't lying. Please. Call her. Dad looked at the clock. I saw him do it. That tiny motion still comes back to me sometimes. He looked at the clock because part of him knew the timing mattered. Then Mom said, Enough. The next 10 minutes happened in pieces. Mom went upstairs. I heard drawers opening. Chloe sat in the dining room sniffling. Dad stayed where he was. I kept telling him, Dad, I wasn't here. You know I wasn't here. He wouldn't look at me. Mom came back with a black trash bag. Not a suitcase. Not even a backpack. A trash bag. She had shoved clothes into it so fast that a sleeve was hanging out of the top. She said, I am done raising a liar who terrorizes this family. I felt cold before I ever stepped outside. You're kicking me out? Mom said. Come back when you stop pretending. Dad finally spoke. Jasmine, don't make this worse. I remember laughing once, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept the sentence. I'm 16. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't for me. They were the tears she used when she wanted witnesses, even if the only witnesses were Dad and Chloe. Then act like it. I turned to Dad. Please just call the counselor. He said, go cool off. We'll talk when everyone is calm. He said it like I was going for a walk, not being put out during severe weather warnings. Mom opened the front door. Ice had already glazed the steps. The porch light made everything shine in an awful yellow way. My phone was at 14%. I didn't have a coat warm enough for that weather because my good coat was still hanging in the hall, and Mom snapped, You don't get to take nice things after what you did. I took the trash bag because I didn't know what else to do. The plastic stretched and squeaked in my hand. The door closed behind me. For the first few minutes I stood on the porch thinking Dad would open it. I thought he would say, That's enough, Audrey. I thought he would at least toss my coat out. Nothing happened. I walked because standing still made me shake harder. I tried calling my cousin Claire, but it went straight to voicemail. I called Dad. No answer. I called Mom. No answer. I sent one text before my fingers got too stiff. Please. I wasn't home. Checked the school. The message was delivered. Nobody replied. The bus station wasn't far in normal weather, but in the freezing rain with a trash bag and a dead phone, it felt like another country. By the time I got there, it was closed. The vending machines were dark. The benches outside were slick with ice. I sat near the side of the building, where the wind wasn't as bad. I remember trying to tuck my hands into my sleeves. I remember thinking I should stay awake, then not being sure how long I had been sitting there. A police officer found me. I don't remember the whole conversation. I remember the flashlight, his voice getting softer when I told him my age, and the way he looked at my soaked shoes and wet socks. I woke up in the ER with a bracelet around my wrist, and my socks in a plastic patient bag. My whole body ached with that deep, buzzing way the cold leaves behind. A nurse asked me questions slowly. Did I know where I was? Did I feel safe going home? Was there an adult I trusted? I started to cry because I couldn't think of one. Then I saw Aunt Ruth. She was sitting beside the bed in a heavy coat, one hand wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. For a second I thought I was dreaming because Aunt Ruth was supposed to be gone from our lives forever. Not dead, but erased so completely that when I once asked about her, Dad had said, Ruth chose not to be family. She stood when she saw my eyes open. She didn't rush me. She didn't grab my hand or demand answers. She just said, You're safe. Don't talk until you want to. I whispered, How did you get called? You had an old emergency card in your wallet, she said. From when I used to babysit you. The hospital called the numbers they had. I hadn't known that card was still there. I hadn't known Ruth's number still worked. I hadn't known anyone would come. Mom and Dad arrived about 20 minutes later. Mom came in angry, which tells you everything. Her daughter was in an ER bed after being found outside during an ice storm, and the first emotion she chose was embarrassment. "This is unbelievable," Mom said. "You dragged the police into family business?" Then Ruth stood up. Dad stopped so suddenly that Mom bumped into his shoulder. "Ruth," he said, "what are you doing here?" Ruth looked at him. "Someone had to answer when your daughter needed family." Mom's face changed. If you've ever watched someone realize the audience isn't controllable anymore, you know the look. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes flicked to the nurse standing near the curtain. "She is my child," Mom said. Ruth said, "Then start acting like it where people can see." The nurse asked me who I felt safe leaving with. Mom started talking over her, saying I was upset, confused, and had a history of making things bigger than they were. Ruth cut in once, calm as stone. "The story you told them doesn't match the child in that bed." A police officer returned. He had already spoken to me enough to know I said I had been put outside. There was a mention of filing a report because I was a minor found in an unsafe situation. A hospital social worker came in too. I was too exhausted to understand all of it, but I understood one thing clearly. Mom couldn't just cry and make this disappear. Not here. Not with Ruth in the room. Dad kept looking at Ruth like she was a locked door he hoped would stay closed. After the hospital cleared it, Ruth took me home with her. Home was a small place with a noisy heater and a kitchen table that wobbled unless you folded a napkin under one leg. It was the safest place I had ever slept. The first week I barely ate. Ruth took me to a diner one morning and ordered eggs and toast. I stared at the plate until everything blurred. She slid the toast closer. "You don't have to finish it. Just start with one corner." "I don't know how to stop wanting them to believe me," I said. Ruth's face softened, but her voice stayed plain. That was Ruth. She never sugar-coated the hard truth. "Then we start with making sure you believe yourself." She bought me a second-hand dresser. That was when she taught me how to fold my hoodies flat, sleeves tucked, so everything fit in one drawer and I could see what I had. "Chaos is easier to survive when your socks have a place," she said. Meanwhile, Mom rewrote the story before I even had the strength to challenge it. The family group chat lit up with messages. "Your mom is devastated. Whatever happened, come home and fix it. Chloe is scared of you, Jasmine. Running away was immature." I typed, "I didn't run away. They put me outside." Nobody responded to that part. Chloe told people I had scared the family. Mom told relatives I disappeared for 2 days and made everyone frantic, even though the ER had called them the same night. Dad said nothing publicly, which meant Mom's version became the family's version. Claire checked on me a few times at first. She was 23 then, older and already treated like a semi-adult in the family. Her messages were awkward. "I hope you're okay. Your mom says you're not ready to talk. Maybe apologizing would make things easier?" I didn't hate Claire. She was just repeating what she'd been fed. But I also didn't have the energy to convince one more person that I deserved basic fact-checking. Ruth didn't push me to fight. She got me through school. She took me to appointments. She sat beside me in offices where adults asked careful questions about home, safety, and future plans. There was brief CPS involvement, but by then, Mom and Dad had settled into a polished version. I was troubled Ruth was interfering, and the family wanted healing when Jasmine was ready to take accountability. What nobody knew was that Ruth was saving everything. One night, a few months after I moved in with her, I found her at the kitchen table with a manila folder open. Inside were printouts, notes, and an old flash drive. She closed it when I walked in. I said, "Is that about me?" Ruth sighed. "Some of it." "Why do you have it?" "Because your mother's version has too many decorations and not enough dates." That was the first time she told me pieces of what had happened before I came to live with her. Ruth had fought with my parents years earlier about the way they treated me. She had been close with Grandma Elaine, closer than Dad admitted. Grandma had been worried about me. She had also set aside money that was meant to help me when I got older. It wasn't a huge fortune, not movie money, but it was real and it had paperwork attached. Ruth had copies because Grandma didn't fully trust Audrey with anything that made Chloe feel less special. The cedar box hadn't just held sentimental things. It held estate notes, account information, and a notarized letter from Grandma explaining what she intended certain savings to be used for. Ruth had a copy of that letter. She also had bank transfer records she'd requested after Grandma died, because something about the timing had bothered her. The money was moved before I got home that day. I stared at the paper until the numbers stopped making sense. So they knew. Not all of it that night, Ruth said. But enough to question Chloe. Enough to call the school. Enough not to put you outside. She also had an email from my school counselor confirming I had been on campus during the time Chloe claimed the confrontation started. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a timestamp and a note about a scheduled student meeting. That little line of text could have saved me if anyone had cared to ask for it. Then there was the voicemail. Ruth played it for me once years after it was left. Dad's voice came through low and tired. Audrey isn't ready to hear what you think you know. I'm asking you not to push this right now. Chloe is fragile, and if this comes out wrong, it'll destroy her. Jasmine is with you, so she's safe. Let things settle. I remember sitting so still I could hear the refrigerator click on. Jasmine is with you, so she's safe. Like the problem was solved because someone else picked up the child he had abandoned. Ruth saved that voicemail as an audio file. She printed a transcript. She kept the original phone backup. She kept the motel receipt from the first 2 nights after the ER because her heater had gone out, and she didn't want me sleeping in a cold apartment. She kept copies of messages from Mom accusing her of poisoning Jasmine. She kept everything. I kept copies because liars hate dates, Ruth said. For a long time I didn't use any of it. People think if you have proof, you automatically want to set the world on fire. I didn't. I was tired. I wanted to graduate. I wanted to stop waking up with my heart pounding every time ice tapped against the window. I wanted to become someone whose day wasn't determined by whether Audrey had decided to perform motherhood at me. I built distance. I skipped holidays. I blocked Chloe for a while, then unblocked her because it felt childish, then blocked her again when she sent me a photo of Mom crying with the caption, "This is what you do to people." Dad sent one birthday card when I turned 18. It said, "Hope you are finding your way." No apology. No invitation. Just a $50 bill in handwriting I used to think meant safety. I mailed the money back. When I was 21, Claire messaged me after a family barbecue I didn't attend. "Can I ask you something without you getting mad?" I wrote, "You can ask. I can decide if I want to answer." She sent back, "Fair." Then she asked, "Was the year the same night you left?" I stared at the message for a while before responding. "Yes. Audrey always said you were gone almost 2 days. The ER called them that night." Claire took longer to reply. "That's not what she told us. I didn't send the folder. Not then. I sent one screenshot. The date on the ER discharge paperwork. I covered the private medical details. Just the date, time, and my name." Claire replied, "Oh." That "oh" did more than any apology she could have offered at that moment. It was the sound of a story cracking. Over the next few years, Claire asked careful questions here and there. She never pushed. She also stopped telling me to come back for Mom. Once she admitted, Robert said something weird. He said, "That night got out of hand. That doesn't sound like what Audrey says happened." I wrote back, "Because what Audrey says happened didn't happen." Still, I didn't detonate the family. Maybe part of me was still waiting for Dad to do it himself. That was the ugly little hope I hated admitting. Not that Mom would suddenly become someone else. Not that Chloe would confess. But Dad. I wanted him to call me and say, "I knew. I was wrong. I chose comfort over you." He never did. Then Chloe got engaged to Ryan. I had met Ryan once briefly at a cousin's baby shower. He seemed normal. Polite. A little overwhelmed by my family, but that was common. Chloe performed sweetness around him like it was a second language. She touched his arm when she laughed. She tilted her head when people spoke. She talked about healing old wounds, as if she hadn't been the one holding the knife. The first invitation came from Mom by text. "Jasmine, I know we have pain in our past, but Chloe's rehearsal dinner would be a meaningful opportunity for this family to move forward." I ignored it. Then Dad texted, "Your mother is trying." Please don't punish everyone forever. I ignored that too. Then Mom sent an email. Polished. Long, full of words like closure, accountability, and family restoration. She wrote, "This family cannot heal while you keep punishing everyone for one difficult chapter." One difficult chapter. That was what she called being put out in an ice storm at 16. Chloe sent a separate text 2 days later. "Can we please not make my wedding about old drama? Just say we were kids and it got messy. Nobody needs details. I just want my sister back." I laughed when I read that. Not a happy laugh. The kind that leaves your throat sore. I wrote back, "What exactly do you want me to say?" She answered too fast. "Just that you're sorry for the pain back then and that we all made mistakes. Mom thinks it would mean a lot if you said it at the dinner. Ryan's family will be there, and I don't want tension." There it was. They didn't want me back. They wanted a prop. A healed younger sister to stand up in front of Ryan's family and confirm the lie without using the ugly words. Mom followed up that night. "Chloe deserves one peaceful night. If you truly want to heal, you will tell everyone you're sorry for the pain you caused." I read it 3 times. Then I took a screenshot. I called Ruth. She answered on the second ring. What did Audrey do? That's how well she knew. I read the texts out loud. Ruth went quiet. Then she said, "You don't owe forgiveness to people who still need you to be guilty." I know. Do you? I looked across my room at my dresser, my hoodies folded in one drawer. I think I do now. Ruth came over the next evening with the manila folder. We spread everything across my kitchen table. The ER record, the school counselor timestamp, the bank transfer documents, Grandma Elaine's notarized note, Dad's voicemail transcript, copies of Mom's old messages accusing Ruth of being unstable, and a printed screenshot from Chloe's old phone backup Ruth had gotten years earlier through a family account device Chloe abandoned when she upgraded. It showed a message Chloe had sent to a friend after the accusation. They believed it. I told you they would. The friend had replied, "What about the money?" Chloe. Mom won't check Jasmine's story. She never does. I had seen it before but not often. Looking at it still made my hands go cold. Ruth watched me carefully. "You don't have to do this." "I'm not doing it because I have to." "Are you sure you want to do it there?" I thought about Mom's email, Chloe's text, Ryan's family, the carefully staged audience. They chose the audience, I said. I'm choosing the truth. I spent the next 2 weeks organizing everything. Not ranting. Not posting. Not calling relatives to campaign. I scanned documents and saved copies in 2 places. I labeled evidence by date. I made a condensed timeline, clean enough that nobody could pretend it was just an emotional dump. Ruth offered to speak for me at the dinner. I told her no. "I need you there," I said. "But I don't want them to say you put words in my mouth." Ruth nodded. "Then I'll sit where you can see me." Claire messaged me 3 days before the dinner. "I heard Audrey is planning some kind of apology moment. Are you okay?" I sent her the school counselor timestamp and the ER date, nothing else. Ask yourself why those 2 dates don't fit the story you were told. She didn't reply for almost an hour. Then, "Jasmine, what happened?" I wrote, "Come to the dinner." The rehearsal dinner was in a private room at a casual restaurant, the kind with beige walls, framed family photos on a display table, folded napkins, grocery store floral centerpieces, and champagne flutes lined up like everyone was fancier than they were. There were place cards. Mine had my name written in Mom's careful cursive, like she had loved me correctly the whole time. Ryan's parents were there, along with cousins, a few older relatives, family friends, and Chloe's bridesmaids. Chloe wore a cream dress and kept touching Ryan's hand. Mom floated around the room glowing, greeting people with both hands, saying things like, "We're so grateful to have everyone together." When she saw me, her eyes got wet immediately. Performance tears warming up. "My baby," she said, reaching for me. I stepped slightly aside so her hug landed awkwardly on one shoulder. "Audrey." She blinked at the name. I hadn't called her Mom in years, at least not to her face. Dad stood behind her. He looked older. Smaller somehow. He said, "Jasmine." I looked at him for a second longer than necessary. "Robert." His mouth tightened. Ruth came in a few minutes after me. Conversations dipped. Some relatives still believed she was the bitter, unstable aunt who had stolen me from my grieving parents. Ruth wore a dark green sweater and carried herself like a woman who had survived being lied about and learned not to bend for it. Claire arrived with her husband, gave me one careful hug and whispered, "I'm here." That almost broke me more than anything else. Dinner started with forced warmth. People passed bread baskets. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. Chloe told Ryan's mother some soft-focus version of our childhood where she and I had our rough patches but always loved each other underneath. I took a sip of water and said nothing. Ruth sat across the room, exactly where I could see her. Mom tapped her glass after the entrees were cleared. The room quieted. "I just want to say how meaningful tonight is," she began. "Not just because our Chloe is beginning this beautiful new chapter with Ryan, but because families are about grace. We have all carried pain. We have all made mistakes. And healing requires courage." Claire's posture changed. She sat up straighter. Mom looked at me. There it was. The setup. "Jasmine," she said softly, "this would be a good time to show everyone you're ready to move forward. Just speak from the heart." The room turned toward me. Chloe's smile was small and controlled. She reached for Ryan's hand and said, "We all made mistakes. I just want my sister back." I looked at her. The girl who had cried on command was now a woman who still thought tears were a legal defense. I stood up. For 1 second, my body forgot I was 27. I felt 16 again. Wet socks. Dead phone. The trash bag ripping on the icy porch step. Dad saying, "Don't make this worse." Then I looked at Ruth. She gave me one tiny nod. I opened my folder. "You wanted an apology in front of everyone," I said. "I brought the reason you're not getting one." The room went so quiet I could hear a fork settle against a plate. Mom's face changed first. "Jasmine, tonight is not the place." I held up my phone. "You made it the place when you asked me to apologize in front of everyone." Then I sent the condensed timeline to the family group chat. Phones started buzzing around the room. One by one. A messy chorus of notifications. Chloe's smile vanished. I placed the first printed page on the table closest to me. "I was 16. I begged you to check the facts. None of you did." Dad stared at the paper but didn't touch it. "This is the ER record from the night police found me after Audrey and Robert put me out during an ice storm. Not 2 days later. Not after I ran away. The same night." Someone whispered. "What?" Mom said. "That is private medical information." I looked at her. "You told people I disappeared for 2 days. I'm correcting the record." I placed the second page down. "This is the school counselor timestamp showing I was still on campus when Chloe claimed I was home destroying Grandma Elaine's cedar box and shoving her." Chloe snapped. "This is insane." Claire's voice cut through from the side. "Is it fake?" Chloe looked at her as if she had betrayed the natural order. "What?" Claire repeated firmer. "Is the timestamp fake?" Chloe didn't answer. I placed down the bank transfer record. "This shows that money connected to Grandma Elaine's savings was moved before I got home that day." Ryan's father leaned forward slightly. Ryan's hand slipped out from under Chloe's. Chloe noticed. Panic flashed across her face before she rearranged it into hurt. "You're really going to ruin my life over something from years ago?" "No, Chloe," I said. "You ruined mine when I was 16. I'm just refusing to keep lying for you at 27. Mom stood. "Enough. You are humiliating your own mother." I placed Chloe's old message on top of the stack. "They believed it. I told you they would." Chloe went pale. Ryan read it from where he sat. His mother covered her mouth with one hand. A cousin at the far end said, "Chloe." Chloe shook her head. "That's taken out of context." Claire said, "What context makes that better?" Dad whispered, "Everyone needs to calm down." Ruth spoke for the first time. Not loudly. She didn't need to. No. Everyone needed to calm down 11 years ago. I placed the voicemail transcript in front of Dad. Robert left this for Ruth after she confronted him. The audio exists. I'm not playing it here because I don't need theatrics, but the transcript is in the timeline. Dad's hands were folded so tightly his knuckles looked white. Claire turned to him. Did you know Jasmine might have been innocent? Mom said sharply. Claire, stay out of this. Claire didn't look at her. Robert, did you know the timeline didn't match? Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Ruth asked. Robert, answer her. Did you know? For years I had imagined that moment. I thought if it ever came, he would defend himself. I thought he would say he had no idea. I thought he would lie with the same weak voice he had used my whole life. Instead, he looked at the transcript and said, I thought it would destroy Chloe. It was not an apology. It was worse. It was confirmation. My throat tightened. So you destroyed me instead. Dad flinched as if I had thrown something. Mom grabbed his arm. Robert. He didn't look at her. He looked at me for maybe the first honest second in 11 years. Your mother wasn't ready to hear it. I almost smiled because it was so perfectly him. Passive even in confession. Audrey didn't need to be ready for the truth. I needed parents. Chloe pushed back from the table. Her chair scraped hard against the floor. I can't believe you're doing this at my rehearsal dinner. You asked me to apologize at your rehearsal dinner. That was different. That was supposed to be healing. No, I said. It was supposed to be useful. Mom started crying. Real tears or fake ones, I didn't care anymore. She pressed a napkin under her eyes and looked around the room, searching for the old rhythm, the one where her tears made everyone protect her. You are humiliating me in front of people who love us, she said. I looked at the family photo wall behind her. Pictures of Chloe in graduation gowns, Chloe at birthdays, Chloe holding flowers. There were photos of me too, but mostly younger ones before the family needed me to disappear. You threw a child into a storm and called it parenting, I said. I showed receipts and you call it humiliation. Nobody laughed. Nobody rushed to comfort her. A few people looked down at their phones again, reading the timeline. Others stared at Chloe like they were seeing her face for the first time. Ryan stood. I need some air. Chloe grabbed his wrist. Ryan, don't. This is family stuff. He looked at the stack of papers, then at her. This is fraud and a lie you carried into our wedding. His parents stood with him. The three of them stepped outside. Chloe followed halfway, then stopped when she realized too many people were watching. Mom turned on Ruth. This is what you wanted. You poisoned her. Ruth didn't move. I didn't save her so she could spend her life asking you to love her correctly. That one landed. Even Mom had no immediate answer. Aunt Linda, one of Dad's older cousins, picked up the bank record with shaking fingers. Elaine had money set aside for Jasmine? Ruth said. Yes. Mom said. It was more complicated than that. Claire said. Audrey, that is not what the records say. Mom snapped. You don't understand what it was like raising them. I said, you raised one of us. You managed the other. Chloe started crying then, but the room didn't move toward her like it always had. She looked around, waiting for the system to activate. For Mom to gather her. For Dad to smooth it over. For relatives to scold me for being cruel. Instead, Ryan was outside. Dad was silent. Claire was reading the timeline. Ruth was watching me, not Chloe. The first relative left without saying goodbye. Then another. A few stayed frozen, trapped between old loyalty and new evidence. I didn't stay to watch the whole collapse. That would have turned it into revenge theater, and I wasn't there to enjoy their panic. I gathered my folder, though I left copies on the table. I looked at Chloe one last time. You don't get to call it old drama when I'm still the villain in your story. She wiped her face. We were kids. You were 19, I said. And yesterday you asked me to lie again. Then I walked out. Ruth followed a minute later. Claire came after us into the parking lot, her face pale and blotchy. I'm sorry, she said. I braced myself because most apologies come with hooks hidden inside them. But Claire said, not because I want anything from you. Because I was wrong. That was the first apology from my family that didn't ask me to make the other person feel better. I nodded. Thank you. Ruth put a hand on my shoulder. Not to steer me. Just to remind me I wasn't standing alone. The fallout was not as instant or dramatic as people imagine. Nobody got arrested in the restaurant. Chloe didn't fall to her knees and confess every detail. Mom didn't suddenly become honest. Real consequences are messier and slower than that. But the story changed that night because the documents were already in the group chat. By the time Mom tried to post her vague statement the next morning about a painful private family matter being weaponized during a sacred season, half the family had the timeline open on their phones. Claire commented, "We blamed the wrong person." Mom deleted the post. Chloe sent me 12 texts before noon. "You're sick. You planned this. Ryan won't answer me. You don't know what you've done. Grandma's money wasn't like that. You always had to make everything about you." I didn't answer. Mom left voice messages. Long ones. Crying. Angry. Soft. Angry again. She said, "I did what I thought was best as a mother." She said, "Chloe was fragile." She said, "You have no idea what you destroyed." She said, "This family cannot heal while you keep punishing everyone." I didn't listen after the first one. I saved them, then sent one written message. I did not create the truth. I stopped carrying the lie. Do not call me. Do not ask for private meetings. Any accusation that I lied, exaggerated, or attacked this family will be answered with the full timeline. I will not attend events where forgiveness is expected as a performance. I will not speak to Chloe unless it begins with a direct admission of what she did. Dad sent a text later that week. "Can we talk?" I wrote back, "No phone calls. Anything you need to say can be written." He didn't respond. Ryan paused the wedding within days. I heard it from Claire, not because I asked, but because Chloe was telling people I had sabotaged her future. Apparently, Ryan told her he needed to understand the money, the message, and why she had asked me to apologize if she knew the story wasn't true. Chloe told him I was obsessed. Then Ryan's mother asked why a school timestamp would lie. Chloe didn't have a good answer. The wedding came off the calendar. Not officially canceled at first, but postponed. That careful word people use when they still want to control the landing. But months passed and no new date appeared. Some relatives apologized. Some did it badly. "I'm sorry, but we only knew what Audrey told us. I wish you had said something sooner." You have to understand how convincing Chloe was. Those apologies went into a mental drawer labeled reputation management. A few were better. Aunt Linda wrote, "I repeated Audrey's version without asking you. That was wrong." One of my cousins sent, "I'm embarrassed I judged you. You didn't deserve it." I accepted those without promising closeness. Ruth got messages too. People who had called her unstable for years suddenly wanted to clear the air. I was at her kitchen table when she read one from a relative who said, "Maybe we all misunderstood your role back then." Ruth read it twice, put the phone face down and snorted. I said, "You okay?" She said, "I didn't need them to like me. I needed them to stop calling you crazy." Then her eyes got shiny, and she pretended to reorganize the napkins. Dad waited almost 2 months before mailing me a letter. It came in a plain envelope with my name written carefully, as if he could make cowardice neat if he used good penmanship. Inside he wrote 3 pages. He said it was a difficult night. He said Mom was overwhelmed. He said Chloe had been in a bad place. He said he regretted how things happened. He said he hoped one day I could understand that he was trying to keep the peace. I read it once. Then I took out a blank card and wrote one line. "Things did not happen. You chose." I mailed it back with his letter folded inside. Mom found other ways to perform victimhood. She told people I had ambushed Chloe. Claire shut that down in the group chat by posting. Audrey asked Jasmine to apologize publicly. Jasmine responded publicly. Mom said Ruth had manipulated me with old documents. Aunt Linda replied, "The dates are the dates." Dad said nothing, which by then helped nobody. His silence had finally lost its usefulness. Chloe tried once to send a message through Claire. "Tell Jasmine I'm sorry things got so messed up." Claire asked me if I wanted to hear it. I said, "No." Claire said, "I didn't think so." There was no direct admission. No, I lied. No, I let you get put outside. No, I took the money. Just passive words floating around like fog, trying to cover the shape of what she did. The biggest change was not that everyone loved me now. They didn't. Some relatives simply went quiet because they were embarrassed. Some probably still thought I should have protected Chloe's wedding because in families like mine, the scapegoat is allowed to be innocent only if she stays convenient. But the old story stopped working. When Mom said I ran away, someone could say, the ER record says otherwise. When Chloe said I attacked her, someone could say, the school record says Jasmine wasn't there. When Dad said it was complicated, someone could say, your voicemail says you knew enough. That was enough. Thanksgiving that year was at Ruth's place. Nothing fancy. Paper plates because Ruth said she wasn't doing dishes for a holiday built on emotional labor. Claire came with a store-bought pie and looked nervous until Ruth took it from her and said, good. I hate baking. We ate turkey from a grocery store tray, mashed potatoes Ruth made too salty, and green beans Claire insisted were supposed to have almonds, even though Ruth told her nobody at that table had asked for tree bark. It was not a movie ending. There was no swelling music. No family reunion. No parents at the door begging for forgiveness. Just 3 women at a small table passing gravy, letting the silence be comfortable instead of dangerous. After dinner, Claire helped clear the plates. Ruth pretended not to notice when Claire wiped her eyes at the sink. Later, I was folding a hoodie from the laundry Ruth had insisted on doing, because she claimed my detergent smelled too ambitious. Sleeves flat. Tucked clean. 1 drawer. Ruth leaned in the doorway and watched me. You good? She asked. I thought about the 16-year-old on the porch, holding a trash bag in the freezing rain, still waiting for her father to open the door. I'm not sure good is the word, I said. But I'm not carrying it for them anymore. Ruth nodded. That works. Revenge didn't give me my childhood back. It didn't make Mom safe or Dad brave or Chloe honest. It didn't turn the relatives who judged me into a family I suddenly wanted. But it gave me ownership of the story. It gave Ruth her name back. It made the people who built comfort out of my silence live with the sound of the truth. They wanted the scared 16-year-old they threw out. They got the woman she survived long enough to become. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.